while big companies have a lot of impact and forget the roots of what led to their success, which is usually like speed of product, speed of delivery. As a leader, the thing that I optimize for is like how to be able to drive both. Iteration speed is a key requirement for good innovation. If your cycle time is like a week, 2 weeks for any change, you just like can't get stuff done fast.
Welcome to Building with AI, the show where we engage in conversations with world-class AI product builders and leaders. We help uncover tactical insights to help you build and scale better AI products. I'm your host, Hamza Choudery, and today I'm joined by Sridhar Ramaswamy, the CEO of Snowflake. Sridhar scaled Google's ads business from $1 billion to $115 billion and founded one of the first AI search companies, Neeva, which was acquired by Snowflake in 2023. During the episode, he discusses first principles for AI product building, the importance of product velocity, the future of the foundation model layer, creating data flywheels with AI, and much more. But before we dig in, here's a quick word from our sponsor. Autoblocks is the leading AI evaluation platform for product teams. It enables your team to collaboratively iterate on prompts, model parameters, and RAG parameters, while letting you retain full control over whatever frameworks or tech stack you want to build with. Seamlessly run tests to evaluate the impact of product changes on quality. Learn how to ship more reliable LLM products at autoblocks.ai. Now, back to the episode. Sridhar, thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you for having me, Hamza. This will be a fun conversation.
Really looking forward to it. Before we dig in, I'd love to hear about your reflections from Snowflake Summit. It's been an exciting few days. Has your heart rate come back down? What are some ruminations you've had?
That was quite the event. Everything from the keynote to making sure that logistics were fine for the Jensen conversation, to the many customer panels, partners. It was wild. I think the amount of energy from customers, partners, lots of people that are building startups on top of Snowflake now, that was also pretty amazing to see. Yeah, it was 4 pretty incredible, memorable days. I'm super excited about it. Obviously, things span the gamut from low level iceberg support and catalogs to things like, oh, you can just talk to your data, but with high reliability. So it was also had quite the breadth. It was an amazing experience.
Awesome. Glad to hear. And before we dig into Sridhar, the CEO of Snowflake, I'd love to hear about your life's journey and just hear about what led you to Brown to study databases, how your career unfolded. How did you arrive in this seat? What is the backstory?
I had a very sciencey background growing up. I grew up in India at a time when pretty much the whole country said, if you're smart, you should become an engineer or you should become a doctor. It's sort of weird, but it was like, super focused, the entire place. I ended up studying computer science at IIT Madras. And it was 4 amazing years, among the smartest people that I have ever collaborated with, professors that could be literally anywhere on the planet, but still choose to stay in India, in IIT to teach. And then, honestly, I came to Brown almost accidentally. Brown had never really given scholarships to graduate students. And I come from a lower middle class family, zero chance we could afford like a paid education, graduate education. And so I was super lucky to get like a full scholarship to Brown. I still remember the evening. There was one phone for the entire dorm of like some 256 rooms. And the way you got a phone call was somebody near the phone would pick it up and would just like yell out, "Hey, call for Sridhar." Ran down, and there was this professor, who went, "Hi, this is Jeffrey Scott Witter from Brown University. I'm pleased to tell you that you've been admitted to Brown and you're going to get a full scholarship." Well, that was my Brown journey.
That's incredible. And I know you spent some time at Bell Labs after graduating. Can you talk us through how you ended up at Google eventually? And I'm keen to dig into your Neeva journey as well, but just how did your interests guide where you spent your time in your career?
So I spent the first 10 years of my, let's call it my post-bachelor career doing research in databases, in query processing, in data in general. That was my specialty. And Bell Labs was probably like the high water mark for what I got done in research. Amazing people, just great colleagues, a really good environment. Um, but there was also a part of me that, felt like doing very specialized research that reached like, a handful of people. I used to joke that maybe 10 people read the papers I write, kind of skim the papers, and two would read it end to end. I was like, I want to have more impact in life. That's why we moved to the Valley. And then after a brief stint at an enterprise startup, which to be honest, I really loved, that was the first place in which I became a manager, first place in which I did software for a living. Dealt with things like enterprise software, support, and actually traveling to various places in the world to meet customers. I discovered I kind of loved it. Um, and then got to Google because the startup didn't do so well in the dot-com bust. And I was very lucky. Again, an accident that placed me in the search ads team, among the most celebrated teams on the planet when it comes to product and making money. It's a little bit like landing in the newsfeed team at Facebook. It's just like you are at the center of the universe. That's kind of how I got started at Google. I actually started as an engineer, even though I ran a team of 100 people at Epiphany because I felt like Google approached computing in a very different way from what everybody had done. At Epiphany, we made enterprise software, but we used to send people CDs, or they would like download a piece of software to run on a box that they bought. And here was Google, everything on the cloud, low cost machines, infinite scale. And so I was like, I need to be an engineer to learn. That's how I joined. And I was an engineer for a year plus before sort of moving back into management. But it's really this combination of software, of customers, creating value, driving a business, which I first started at Epiphany, but became the defining aspect of my career at Google. Of course, I went on to lead all of ads and commerce. And the list is like long and kind of silly because it's like, oh, it's search ad, it's display ads, products for publishers, products for advertisers, exchanges, Google Analytics, travel, shopping, payments. It was quite the wild job with impact that is still hard to imagine. Like, when I come to New York and tap my phone on the subway, I helped launch that, obviously with the team, but I was the exec in charge of Google Pay. It was just a mind-blowing journey.
That's incredible. And scaling that business from around $1 billion to $100 billion is just incredible and a testament to your hypothesis that the private sector is really where a lot of impact really
You can
happens.
have huge, huge impact. And even to this day, I feel fortunate that I work on something like software that is still early in how much impact that it has had on the world, in being part of something that is growing so robustly so that people like you and me actually get a chance to have impact and change the world. I got to tell you, Hamza, I feel blessed.
Incredible. And after Google, you had a brief stint in venture before starting your own venture, Neeva. And I'd love to dig into what drove that decision uh, to go and start something later in your career. You're a founder later in your career after a long stint at Google, but also very early to the AI wave. Before ChatGPT was a thing, before it became part of the social consciousness, you went out on a limb and you saw an opportunity to create a subscription-based search model. I'm keen to hear about where your mind was at in that moment and just how that journey unfolded.
Yeah, I would say one way to think about it is sort of, risk taking and risk tolerance. In my mind, there is always like a fine balance in life, which is all of us get good at certain things early on. We either have a natural inclination, a talent, let's say, for it, or something happens and we go develop a skill for something. Um, but quite a few people are hesitant to change things after they get going on a particular way. My life has always been characterized by some amount of risk taking. Not wild, but still some risk. I'll give you examples. After my high school, I didn't really get into IIT the first time around. I was pretty unhappy about it because these were the premier institutions in the country. And so much to my dad's dismay, I didn't really, go to school the year after high school, but instead stayed at home and restudied for the IIT. Um, I was a little bit of a risky move. There's an exam that 100,000 people take and maybe 2,000 get in. So it's not exactly easy. But I had strong conviction even then, and I ended up getting into computer science at IIT Madras. Um, and then similarly, even the change from, say, Bell Lab doing research and being someone that was quite accomplished at research to, okay, let me start over as an engineer. Sure, I knew software engineering, but I'd never done it for a living. Or from Epiphany to Google, where I go from running a team of 100 people back to all be an IC. Neeva is one of those moves. 15 years at Google is actually like dissimilar to other phases in my career where I stayed on like one trajectory that went up for like 15 years. And so Neeva was at a core level a desire to rethink something that was fundamental to people's lives, which is search, their relationship with information. And my co-founder and I had this very strong thesis that Google was so successful that there must be a different. And these things are like hard. First of all, to create. Obviously, search is a very established product. We knew we were taking a lot of risk, but we felt that strong conviction. And things like the subscriber model or not doing ads were means to an end. We said we want to be laser focused on what is search for the next 50 years going to look like, and then how do we go about creating it. Um, and sadly, I have to say that we absolutely had the right idea, but we were probably a couple of years too early in terms of, finding that perfect takeoff point for a startup. I mean, that's a whole other story. And then, within a startup journey, it is important in life in general. It is important that you adapt to the situation. We had spent like 2, 3 years doing the hard work of building a search engine. And then when we saw early GPT-3, versions, a light bulb went off in our heads. We were like, wait, this is the opportunity to rethink search. This was March, April. We did a demo days with the team in like April 2022 of like, hey, let's go all in. What can this mean for search? Because all of a sudden language models were doing things that were basically considered impossible, like this task of abstractive summarization, which is like a fancy way of saying, hey, can you look at a blog and in less than 300 milliseconds write a 4-sentence summary? You know this, a human will find it very hard to do things like that. And, people are pretty smart. And so that was like our big aha moment for AI is going to change search in a big way. But the core conviction of Neeva was always that 15 years in, there had to be a better product.
Yep. And your intuition was certainly right. And now we're seeing folks like Perplexity really going after the space and finding success. So it's great to see that validation, but market timing is obviously a big variable. I'm curious to hear about your time at Neeva and your insights from innovating within a startup versus a big company like Google. Any big takeaways that you have? I know that now a big part of your focus at Snowflake is increasing the velocity of innovation within this behemoth. How is your experience at Neeva gonna influencing the way that you're leading this time around? Any changes from your time at Google?
I mean, at Google, my team's priced speed. I am always of the firm conviction, you know, like being super quick, being prolific. Virtuosity, in my opinion, beats strategy every single time. But, I place my bets on people that can commit to a situation and can be super adaptive. And to me, that part is important. I lived that at Google with my teams, where we ran many celebrated projects that were basically considered impossible. Things like the desktop to mobile transition, something we called enhanced campaigns, or even reacting to Apple's privacy changes in the Safari browser or GDPR. we launched the first ever completely AI-driven app install product called Universal App Campaigns back in 2016. Fastest ramp up to like, if I remember correctly, to like multiple billions of dollars ever. As I said, I price virtuosity, and I refuse to listen to people that tell me is like speed, things like speed or quality. I'm kind of like, you really need both. Having said that, um, you even in a startup, you need to think about what are axes where you really do want like freedom to innovate quickly. What are the things that you need to put into place? Pretty much, after you've written code on something for 3 months, you're going to realize that breaking what you have already promised your customers, if there are real customers, is a pretty bad thing. Startups have the speed to iterate very quickly, but they struggle to have impact, while big companies have a lot of impact and forget the roots of what led to their success, which is usually like speed of product, speed of delivery. And as a leader, the thing that I optimize for is like how to not make this an either or, how to be able to drive both. And even at Snowflake, I can now confidently tell you that when it comes to areas like AI, it's like standing start 9 months later, we are world class. And to me, this is again a testament to iterate quickly, be responsive, and then the opportunity, will follow.
So we established that Neeva might have been a bit early to the market. Can you talk us through how the Snowflake acquisition came about and how you started building a relationship with Frank, and also your mandate as SVP of AI? What was sort of the duty that you were handed?
You know, early last year, it was driven less by our ability to raise money, which we could, and more by can we live up to valuations in a 5% interest rate environment. And that was the primary reason why we said, like, hey, we can't catch up to our value. For example, if you assume a more rational multiple, like 10 to 15 times revenue, even if your valuation is 300 million, you're now talking like, hey, you really should be making between 20 to 30 million. We were nowhere close to that. We were a good outcome for Neeva last year would have been we ended the year at 10 million ARR, and we needed to raise more money on top of the 300 million. We are like, structurally, we are just living in a very different universe. And raising is a dangerous place to be because hype cycles come and go. That was the primary reason for the acquisition talks. And Snowflake was just a really good set of people to interact with to create this future together. This is everybody from Benoit and Thierry, our founders, to folks like Christian, our head of product, Greg, our head of engineering, and of course, Frank himself. I knew Frank a little bit from before. We had been part of a dinner a few years ago because he also has an association with Greylock, but it's really the strength of the team that attracted us to Snowflake. And our broad mandate was make Snowflake a powerhouse in search as well as AI. And yes, I was made the SVP in charge of AI. It was a pure, lead by the power of your ideas, soft power kind of position. So I worked very closely with the engineering and the product teams that were working on AI. And they came up, in many, many, many cases with brilliant ideas, like Cortex AI, which is our managed layer for AI. It basically makes AI a core part of Snowflake for all of our customers, makes any number of things basically like trivial to do. And projects went from, oh, you need to have like a software team, you need to stitch various things together, to you run two commands and out comes a chatbot. Or you put some SQL and now AI transformations are part of what Snowflake can do. It's a process of iteration. I would say we firmed up what we wanted to be roughly 3-4 months, and then announcing the products, but certainly getting them delivered was what like I did for the first 9-10 months of my stay at Snowflake. We've laid a good foundation, but it's really all of these things put together that led to this pretty remarkable transformation for Snowflake in AI.
Awesome. And I remember the day you were announced as the next CEO, and our family chat was blowing up because we really saw this as a big signal that Snowflake was all in on AI. And it's great to see the company really adapting to this monumental technological wave, especially when there are a lot of companies that will give lip service around how they're AI first, but not really, walk the walk.
It's hard to do. To me, this is where hiring the right people. We have hired a foundation model team like demigods, whose papers I've read for the past 5 years, like Samyam and Yoshang from the DeepSpeed team. I'm like, holy cow, they're actually part of Snowflake now, but also people that are amazing in the inference space, people that are amazing in the modeling space. So it's a lot of new and different kinds of skills that have to come together to come up with a stack from bottom to top, which is everything from training foundational models to being able to host them very efficiently, to how do you integrate them tightly into Snowflake, to how do you make it trivial for somebody to create like a vector or semantic index. As I said, right now with Snowflake, you can run two commands and have a chatbot ready to go. Or you can write a piece of SQL and it's going to do AI transformations for you. We also work with an ecosystem of partners, people like Landing.ai, as well as Relational AI. So it's really like, it's just amazing that an end-to-end offering like this came together very quickly. By the way, it also put an end to internal discussion about speed or quality because people are like, ooh, okay, we get it. It's speed and quality. And then you see this in the Iceberg team. You see this in the Polaris team, where we went from idea to product very, very quickly. You know, like uh, like speed is contagious. People love it because you can iterate very quickly. And it's been pretty fun to see the transformation within Snowflake.
I'd love to hear how you think about Snowflake's position in the Gen AI stack, and maybe we can compare it to the position in the modern data stack. And how does that guide when you decide to partner with another vendor, build something in house? What are sort of the guardrails around the product strategy at Snowflake?
Let's unpack. Snowflake's core strength is in data. We are an incredibly efficient analytics store, and also doing things in the transactional space. And over time, we have added really cool features like data sharing, and this has been revolutionary for many industries. I told you I ran the payments team. We used to have integrations with multiple, like hundreds of different partners who would send us FTP files every day. Sadly, payment settlements still work on FTP files. Super error prone. Each one of them is a project. Stuff would break every single day. What Snowflake data sharing did was it made data sharing real time, cross cloud, and integration less. And so that was like part two of what Snowflake did. And then the cloud came from the fact that we said, if you want to write data centric application, if you want to run code, you're better off just running it right next to the data as opposed to taking data out and doing something else with it. And that part is also our partnership sort of extensibility strategy. So we want to make it easy for people to write things that act on data. Now, AI is a horizon. And the reason I say that is I think of it as a set of foundational capabilities that is going to change everything in the data ecosystem. It's going to make migrations from one system to another much, much easier. It is going to make it easier for you to create data pipelines that transform data. It's going to make it easier for you to have declarative rules, for example, that say things like, hey, if PII accidentally comes into the schema, make sure that you warn me. And then obviously, AI being used in data pipelines to transform data, things like extracting sentiment, extracting summaries from customer feedback, or pulling things out, structured data out from documents that customers have. And so we enable those things. We also build a few applications. What I mean by that, something like a chatbot, I consider like, it's an application template rather than an entry point. We want to make it trivial for people to create chatbots. We want to make it trivial for people to be able to ask business questions of structured data that is in Snowflake. Um, Roughly the way you should think about it is anything that you want to do with AI on data that is in Snowflake, we will make it easy efficient, and reliable. That's our AI strategy. And in terms of what goes into the core, it is basically around foundational capabilities in language models, whether it is for the purposes of like embedding and RAG, retrieval augmented generation, or for being able to do things like talking to your data, which is now tool use, more SQL generation, or agentic things, again, on top of data. You want to make sure that that's part of the core platform. That leaves a huge amount of space for partners. And so we have partners. I talked about Landing.ai, Andrew Ng's company. They do like vision model. So if you want to do like, if you want to extract structured data from pathology reports, their landing lens works incredibly well. But we also work with other partners like relational.ai. And so we work with a lot of partners to extend what is possible. One of my PMs built like a demo pretty much in a couple of hours that can take an open source, the Whisper model, use that to drive transcripts from videos sitting in S3, and then to use our semantic index to create a chatbot. You can go from I have videos to I have a chatbot that can tell me or that can let me converse in natural language on what's in these videos. And so these are the things that we want to make possible with the extensibility part. We're going to be very, very good at the core of what AI can do with data, but we work with a lot of partners and we want us to be a true platform where we drive a lot of value. So I think of this very much as a win-win because the space is like so vast right now.
Great. And I'd like to double click into, Snowflake as a platform for building AI applications. One, I'm curious to hear about if more customers are typically focusing on internal use cases to drive efficiencies within their companies. And if you do have examples of Snowflake customers that are also building like, proper externally facing products using Snowflake as a foundation for, the intelligence layer, the data layer.
Yeah. I mean, so Snowflake as a platform for people writing applications is actually it's many years old. People like Bayer that are using Snowflake AI, it's a product called Cortex Analyst, to make data available to business users, that internal, but business users. We also have people that have developed chatbots as a Snowflake. We have an IT chatbot called assistant.snowflake.com. And then people are definitely using us for data transformations. There's a VC fund, for example, that uses Snowflake AI to analyze earnings reports and derive summaries, derive data from those things. Snowflake generally powers sort of a lot of the like internal analytics, internal data engineering, and machine learning use cases. People then build models and then deploy them for external systems as well. I would say that, as I said, we have over 700 use cases for AI that people are actively developing, with several dozen already in production. Um, and they run the gamut from document processing to like better just unstructured text processing to chatbots to people enabling business users to get at data. It spans the spectrum in terms of what people are doing.
Yeah, can we talk a bit more about Snowflake Cortex for our listeners? Just unpacking how they can conceptualize Snowflake's Cortex offering.
So Cortex AI is the AI platform layer in Snowflake. It is everything from embedding models to Mistral Large to Reka Core, and that partnership list keeps expanding. Snowflake's sort of secret sauce is that we integrate it tightly into everything that we do. So, for example, if you want to call, if you want to do sentiment detection, you just in SQL say snowflake.cortex.sentiment underscore detect, and you can pass it a column and out will come a score. Um, and so, like, that's the magic of Snowflake. Cortex Analyst is a way to take language input, somebody speaking and asking for business information. And underneath, we generate the SQL queries. An analyst has to set up the system so that it is high precision. Um, But again, we make that simple. Um, this is the gist of what Snowflake AI is: a platform layer that anybody can access, plus a set of applications that make AI like easy and reliable and cost efficient for all of our customers. And anybody that is writing AI applications on top of Snowflake, like Coda, for example, with whom we announced a partnership, can access this index, can access the AI layer to be able to do additional things. But the simplest way you should think about, like Cortex AI and what we are doing with AI in general is anything you can imagine you want to do on data that is in Snowflake powered by AI. Not only do we make that possible, we make that easy out of the box.
Incredible. And you alluded to this the term model garden. Snowflake has a long list of foundation model partners. I'm curious what drove the decision to develop Arctic and how you see the foundation model layer playing out. Are we going to see, a handful of API models prevail? What's the role of open source? I know it's a meaty question, but just curious to hear where your thought is.
I would almost say like that's the $1 trillion question that a lot of big shots are facing. Absolutely, we have wonderful partnerships. I like whether it is Mistral or Reka, whose founders I know, love, and respect. I think partnerships are an important part. As I said, we also have partnership with folks like Landing that do different kinds of models. We did our own foundation model because we think that AI skills are a necessity for any company that aspires to do meaningful things with data, because it is such a transformative technology. Having said that, like, look, we are not at the level of investment or capability in terms of how many people, how many dollars, so on and so forth, as let's say an OpenAI. But this space is rich. We are working on things like how do we develop the best SQL generation model? How do we develop the best model for things like retrieval, where this pair of embedding model plus retrieval model is world class in its ability, for example, to write cited summaries. So there are areas where we feel we can specialize and be world class. That's where we want to. Now, to your $1 trillion question of where is the world of foundation models headed, there are people absolutely spending $1 billion to train the next model. So far, these models are showing promise along dimensions where you would expect to see promise. In other words, they have better MMLU scores. Okay, MMLU scores, it's like it's world knowledge. Okay, having somebody that can memorize, I don't know, 6 Encyclopedia Britannicas as opposed to 4. I mean, that's it's nice, but really, like you could, of course, just thumb through the fifth and the sixth Encyclopedia Britannica instead of spending the $1 billion. To me, the big prize here is much better planning. The big prize here is much better chain of thought. It's an open research problem whether you can make progress on model abilities to do these things without necessarily getting much, much better at things like world knowledge. I talk to a lot of people, and you get as many opinions as the number of people that you talk to. I hope the world doesn't go into a phase where only 2 or 3 companies can train these kinds of foundational models, because it means that most of the value of AI will be captured by them. I think this is the reason why we bet big on things like open source, what other partners can do. And we also bet big on our friends at Mistral and Reka because we want them to be successful. I think this plurality of choice is really, really, really important for the world as a whole. I think we will just have to wait and see in terms of is there another big jump in model capability. As I said, on one hand, I want that to happen because I think that's generally a cool thing. But on the other hand, a world in which there are like 2 people that know how to do this, I think it's an awkward world.
100% agree, and also an ardent supporter of the open source community.
It is silly to say things like, oh, models should be regulated so that only a few responsible people can have them. Those sound like very self-serving arguments.
Totally agree. I'd love to dig into some of the challenges you've seen, some of the novel challenges with building LLM-based products. But while we're still talking about foundation models, I know Jensen mentioned this term data flywheel during Summit. Can you just quickly touch on how customers are using their data in Snowflake to make their AI-powered products even better over time?
Yeah, I think it's a very cool concept. The idea is that there are many applications. Customer service is the prototypical example, but even things like business users accessing data, or honestly, even search, okay, you can think of as falling into the same bucket. The idea is that the modern AI application has a data repository. This repository can be empty in the beginning, it gets added on. But now imagine a human assisted loop for something like customer support, where if there is a question that comes from a customer, you consult with the data repository, see if it's an already known question. If it is, you generate an answer and send it to the user. This is interactive, this is beautiful, this is quick. On the other hand, if you're not confident about the answer, you route it to a human and say, hey, can you suggest us an answer? And when that answer is given, this pattern repeats itself in many cases, where as people use the product, it gets better. By the way, if this sounds familiar, it is. In the sense, this is one of the biggest signals that helps Google search. I tell people that the best search result for a query is one that everybody else in the world has said is the best result for the query. And so that's the power of the feedback loop, except that with AI, you're also generating new content. So as I said, something like Cortex Analyst has a similar model. We have answered some questions. We are unsure about some questions. Let's send that off somewhere, help have a human assist, and that makes the core product strong. To me, this is a pattern that we absolutely see, for example, in things like customer support use cases that people have written on top of AI, because that is very, very amenable. Jensen's larger vision, which I agree with, is that, you know, repositories that include, for example, our processes. How did we pitch a particular product to a customer within Snowflake, for example, now becomes part of this data repository. So if a new person that came to Snowflake says, I want to pitch, I don't know, Cortex Analyst to a new user, what are things that I should say? Use the repository to give an answer. And if there is a new use case where there is not an answer, you get an expert to write the answer, feeding back into that repo. So it's a different way of thinking about like how does AI become not only like an interlocutor to information you already have, but is part of a flywheel that creates new information. This is a pattern that we repeat to our customers in terms of how they should be thinking about AI applications as well.
Really powerful framework. Before we jump into the lightning round, I'd love to hear about challenges that you've seen with building LLM-based products. Oftentimes we hear that the non-determinism of these products is really quite a hurdle to get over. How is Snowflake helping teams build reliable production-grade applications?
Well, this is a subject that's clearly close to your heart. Our magic words are easy, efficient, and trusted. And the trusted part means that we want people to believe the AI applications that they create. Hallucinations do not induce belief; they induce disbelief in how people think about AI. And so we very much tell people, you need to think about AI applications. Anytime you write a new piece of code, you have an implicit understanding of what right and wrong is. If you create a calculator, you don't think like, today the calculator is moody and 3 times 4 is going to be 11. And, you need to have a similar framework when you're thinking about AI applications. If you're creating a chatbot, for example, it needs to exist in the context of, will it get what is the accuracy that it is going to get? What's the precision that it is going to get for the top 100 queries that matter? Maybe it's a top 1,000 queries. Maybe it's 1,000 random queries from the search engine that you have seen before. And so it is really important that people have this kind of a framework. We acquired a company called TruEra. As the name indicates, True Era, it's really about how do you like verify that AI applications are behaving well. But much more importantly, as I said, is really about bringing back the software engineering mentality to how do you create AI products. I tell people, even in medicine, even in crazy applications of AI that you can think of, you have the notion of what is right and what is wrong, just factually in terms of how should the application work. And this is where like even your work comes in, where it's really about what is a framework of expectation, what does it mean to have a false positive, a false negative. And so, these applications very quickly get into things that everybody is familiar with. A doctor might know nothing about AI, but they can sure as hell tell you what a correct diagnosis is and what an incorrect diagnosis is. It's just that we need to map their understanding of the world into like software engineering terms, and make sure that you preserve it. I mean, you know this. Like language models are moody. You change one semicolon or a comma in a prompt, and all of a sudden they give you different answers. I mean, it's okay that they do that, but we need that like overall loop of what does it mean for it to be an application? What does it mean for it to be reliable? I love the magic, but I also go like, please, can you also bring back some engineering in how you think about things?
Exactly. No, 100% agree. And it's quite a balancing act because if you eliminate the non-determinism, you eliminate the magic. So being able to have stochastic models that are still reliable and useful is really at the core of building an AI product.
I think like controllability, for example, for image models, like I often have frustrating conversations where I'll be like, oh, do this, but now change this. There is a lot for us to be discovering in terms of what does it mean to be a good AI application.
Awesome. Well, really excited for a lightning round, a few fun questions just to close things out. On a personal level, I'd love to hear about what drives your motivation to keep, you know, working so hard to make an impact in the world.
I like work. I feel fortunate to be able to work on something that impacts so many people at Snowflake, so many of our customers, so many people in the world. I would say for me, it is this combination of I genuinely enjoy the work that I do and it has big impact. That's like the fuel that keeps my motivation going.
I know you have history as a drummer. What is your favorite music genre?
So I learned Carnatic music for a very long time. I learned mridangam from this wonderful master called Subhash Chandran, and so I like many different kinds of drumming. Like I think the tabla is a wonderful instrument. My son plays jazz drums, Western jazz drums. So I'm a big fan of percussion in general. But if you were to ask me like what are among my favorite pieces of drumming, it's probably like compositions in Carnatic music played on the mridanga.
Incredible. And final question, what is a hot take that you have about the AI space and a contrarian take that maybe not everyone will agree with?
It's actually not a contrarian take. It's in a weird sense conventional wisdom, which is that we will overestimate what AI can do in the short term and underestimate what it's going to do in the long term. And this is true even if you know it to be true, which is sort of a funny thing to say. But to me, I think that's the real potential. And as long as we continue to apply the things that we know in terms of engineering and expectation and the framework that the technology exists in the real world, I think the more likely it is that there'll be meaningful and positive change driven by AI.
Sridhar, this has been an absolute pleasure. So much wisdom and knowledge shared in this hour. Any parting words for our audience before we sign off?
No, Hamza, this has been a really fun conversation. As I was saying earlier, I think this is hugely, hugely impactful technology, opens up so many creative possibilities and, in so many of us. I'll be excited to learn more, about like other conversations you have and new apps that people are creating. I genuinely get a kick out of the fun stuff that people do.
Yeah, it's a real privilege to live during this period and moment in time. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Hamza.